All right, everyone, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining. So today we have a very special guest, Darius Bucher, and he works with RTI, so Reforestation Technology International and Integral Forest Management. If you want to go to the next slide. So today we're going to do a draw to enter to win $50 to the Fortech online store. So if you can type in the chat your name, company that you work with, and email address, and you'll be eligible to win a $50 online coupon. Yeah, Riley just entered in the chat there the link to the store so you can see what's all in there. Just a bunch of apparel to the forest industry. So some of them are shown there in the background: Women in Forestry, Tree Hustler, and then just some general Fortech stuff. So yeah, again, if you want to type your name, company, email address into the chat, then you're eligible to win $50 to the Fortech store at the end of the webinar. So yeah, I guess I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Brandon Soraka, founder and currently in position as CEO with Fortech. And yeah, I'll be sort of leading the webinar today, but handing it over to Darius to go into detail about their product, fertilizer tea bags. So without further ado, we'll hand it over to Darius. If you want to go to the next slide.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that. Yeah, I met Brandon at the Northern Silviculture Committee meeting in Prince George, BC, a couple of months ago. So he invited me to the webinar today to tell you a bit about our product. My name is Darius Bucher. I'm a registered professional forester in British Columbia. Going too far here. I've been doing this for over 30 years. Doing silviculture in BC, of which 25 I've been utilizing products by Reforestation Technologies International. Number of those years, or 6 of those years, I was a silviculture forester myself, working for Gilbert Smith Forest Products, which is located in Barrier, BC, and got the itch to jump out on my own. And when I did that, they happened to need a sales rep. And I was just a natural, I guess, because they were just getting going in BC and I'd already been using their products. So for the last 19 years, I've been representing them. And during that time period, I have distributed probably over 150 million tea bags so far. RTI, or Reforestation Technologies International, is the company I represent. So they've been around for about 30 years now. They originally, just like anybody else starting out, started in their garage making tea bag fertilizer. Got the vision. They've sold as a company throughout the US and Canada and throughout the world over 750 million tea bags. Currently have a production facility down in Gilroy, California that's located on 13 acres, which includes research and development departments as well. One of the things that they're really known for now is their biologicals. So in 2006, they got going with producing mycorrhizae and nitrogen fixing bacteria. And we call them extreme gardeners, but we've had a lot of giant pumpkin growers who've been growing world record size pumpkins. I think one of the biggest ones was over 2,500 pounds using our products. And we've just recently gotten our biologicals registered for use in Canada in 2022. Last but not least, about RTI, they are known as the oldest running and most renowned producer of mycorrhizal inoculum and their bacteria products, and they sell their products under 5 different brands. So now we're going to go and talk about the part that I'm involved with, and that would be the fertilization at the time of planting. That fir tree that you're looking there, right there, that's a Douglas fir. That's during its first growing season. I think that gives you a bit of just a rough idea of the kind of potential that we can get by fertilizing at the time of planting with our tea bag fertilizer. So to start it off, I just thought I'd present why the need for tea bag fertilizer? What is the need for fertilizing at the time of planting? I mean, it's been quite common now in BC. It's been happening for the last 30 years, but I'm not so sure about Alberta and Saskatchewan. I don't think a lot's been going on there. But at any rate, just starting off with, here's a seedling. And when we're looking at a seedling, the assumption is, of course, that it's going to grow into a mature crop tree and it's going to be healthy and vigorous. But really, when we're given that seedling and the planter grabs a hold of it before it puts it into the ground, all that seedling is potential. It's up to us as foresters to actually draw that potential out of the seedling. I look at it as a package of genetics that is designed to perform under a certain set of conditions. It's up to us to create those conditions. So what does a seedling want to do, and what are some of the conditions that we want to set up for the seedling? Of course, here's a spruce tree that's 2 years old, or a third growing season, that was planted near Blue River, and boy, these are brush pits. But the bottom line is that seedling wants to capture the site before its competition can. It wants to get a hold of all the moisture and nutrients that it can. It wants to get all the daylight that it can. These things are carbon capturing machines that want to produce volume, but we have to give them the opportunity to do that. So how does a seedling capture a site? Well, the first thing that we look at and that it wants to develop is, of course, its foliage. That's how it photosynthesizes. That's how it gets energy from the sun. It wants to produce that. But the second thing, in order to be able to produce that crown, it needs a very solid root system to get moisture and nutrients to the crown for its development. The crown and the fine roots are the most nutrient demanding portions of your seedling. So we want to make sure, and if you take a look at that seedling right there, you'll see the balance. I know a lot of people, foresters, talk about, well, they want a seedling that's got a really big root system so they can get going. But the bottom line is, if you look at this seedling, you can see that it's quite well balanced. The crown and the roots are similar size. You can't have a crown without the roots, and you can't have roots without the crown. So we want to produce a balanced seedling to capture that site. In order to do that, of course, this tree, they want to capture carbon. So at the beginning of a seedling's life, this is when its demands for nutrients are the greatest. So that's that tree that I'm standing behind there. That is a 5-year-old lodgepole pine. If you take a look at it, when it's given the nutrients that it needs to be able to form its crown and thereby its root system, you can see how thick a crown that it can form. And it's all about one thing. It's all about capturing carbon. It's all about photosynthesize to make energy. Something that's really interesting that a lot of people may not know is the more energy that that crown can capture, the bigger the root system can be created by that tree. Up to 70% of your photosynthate that crown produces goes into the root system. Roots have no way of producing energy on their own. They respire. They need everything the crown can form it. So the bigger the crown that you can make, the bigger the root system, the more resources that can be drawn off a site. To produce a bigger crown, you can see it's kind of like a perpetual motion machine. The faster that you can get that momentum going, the better the result of that tree and its growth over the long term. So yeah, here's an example of a lodgepole pine in one of my trials that I've got going. This trial's much older now, but that's the size of that tree after it was fertilized at the time of planting after its 7th growing season. So just another sign of the potential. So how do we help the seedling do what it wants to do, and that's capture and occupy the site? This is what the seedling needs. First of all, I mean, even when we're fertilizing at the time of planting, we have to be able to think about these other site limiting factors. We have to make sure that the seedling's in the clear so it has light. Want to make sure it's in a location and in a microsite where it has adequate soil moisture. Want to make sure that the soil temperature and air temperature for that seedling is working just right too, so that it can function. And of course, as I was discussing, we're not going to get a big crown for that tree if we don't have proper nutrition. So that's where we come in by providing the nutrition for the seedling with our tea bag fertilizer. I'm going to read this out, not to be monotonous, but this is so critical. I really, in summary, what I'm wanting to say is, and I can see it from my own trials, and it's been researched out by others, the bottom line is there is no more pivotal moment to determine the growth trajectory of a plant, of a tree, than at the time of planting. When it goes into the ground, you can have more effect on what happens with that tree over the time of it, the life of that tree at that moment than any other time in its growth period. So in the beginning of a seedling's life, nutrient accumulation is very rapid as it develops its foliage and fine roots. In consequence, nutritional problems are most likely to develop in the early years while the green crown is being developed. Later on, trees start to retranslocate nutrients, so it's not as critical. Therefore, it's at this stage when the concentration of nutrients is likely to be the critical factor controlling the rate of crown development, and responses to a wide range of fertilizer nutrients can be expected. It's also at the time when judicious fertilizer application can most influence the development of the stand, perhaps saving many years of rotation length. And that is true. My trials, my long-term trials that I've got going on have been showing that. The only problem with the seedling when we put it into ground, we got the plug. That is when the seedling comes from the nursery and you plant it. That's all it has for site. That's all it has for resources. That's all it has for nutrients, and immediately right away, moisture. It has to be able, in order to get the resources from the site, it has to be able to get that root system established and drawing moisture and nutrients from the site around it. So we can kind of look as the tea bag, the fertilizer that we use as a bridge from the nursery of the site to give an easy source of nutrients to that seedling so that it can get its root system out there so it can develop its crown to capture the site. So once it's planted, like I was saying, the seedling wants to get its roots out. It wants to access site resources. The only problem is this takes time. And if you're in a site that has brush competition, or like the southern interior BC, you have a drought coming probably within a month of your seedling being planted, you don't have a lot of time for roots to get developed. You got to get this tree going, and you got to get it going quickly. This is von Liebig's law of the minimum. The bottom line is your most limiting nutrient is going to determine the potential growth rate of your tree. So we want to make sure that when we're giving that tree nutrition at the beginning of its life, that it's well balanced. We want to make sure that it has everything it needs. Lots of people think that proper nutrition of a tree, and this is what we talk about whenever we're fertilizing trees, is pouring on the nitrogen. Yes, it's the largest nutrient that a tree may need, but other nutrients are just as important, and lacking any one of them can still hinder the growth rate of your tree. Balance is just as important as as the abundance. So I gave you the example of magnesium. Now, most people don't talk about magnesium because it's considered a minor nutrient in the requirement. But I show a chlorophyll molecule and what it looks like. And the reason for this is just to demonstrate that, yeah, you can see the 4 nitrogen atoms surrounding the magnesium, but if we don't have magnesium or enough magnesium to go with the nitrogen, we still end up with a limiting factor that's hindering the development of chlorophyll, which is going to hinder your ability of your seedling to photosynthesize. So we can end up in a situation like this. Most people would see a yellow tree and say, well, it's a nitrogen deficiency. It seems like every time there's something yellow, it looks like a nitrogen deficiency. Well, this is actually a magnesium deficiency in this particular tree. So you can see how the tree's ability to photosynthesize and capture a site has been hindered just by that missing of one nutrient in the proper ratio. The other thing that people think about, and I've heard a lot over my years as a silviculture forester promoting this product, is that seedlings on rich sites don't benefit from the use of fertilizer. Well, I cannot think of a more nutrient rich area of the province to grow trees in than the forests around Blue River. And I can tell you right now, if we did not fertilize on the time of planting, our trees would be lost to the brush. That seedling that you see sitting right there in front of that brush, which is quite a nutrient rich site, was fertilized at the time of planting. You can see how much faster the brush is growing than your seedling. You want to get that seedling going so that it's not hindered by its competition. Here's another example. This is also in one of the richer areas of the interior of BC where these seedlings were. This is not considered a nutrient limiting site, but you can see the difference after the first growing season of seedling, which is fertilized at the time of planting with one of our Tea Bag Fertilizer products. That would be the one on the right versus the one on the left, which was not fertilized at the time of planting. You can just see that there is not enough access to site resources by those seedlings when they're first planted. Having a little bit of help by tea bag fertilizing can be huge. Here's just another example. I collect foliage to do nutritional analysis on this particular site at the end of the first growing season. I just randomly select 25 trees of treatment and control, but you can see the difference in the length of the foliage that was grown during the first growing season. Just look at the size, not only the length, but you can also see the diameter is much greater. If you look closely, you can see buds on the fertilized ones. It's pretty hard to see any future buds on the unfertilized seedlings. And look at the color. You can see that the control trees are definitely, even though they're good trees, even though they are put on a decent site, still lacking nutrition. So what does a tree do when it gets proper nutrition at the time of planting? You can see that when we can get a tree, allow it to capture the site at the very beginning and have access to site resources, even though our fertilizer is generally gone after the first growing season, that the benefit goes on long after. So here we are at year 11 in this particular site, and you can see the difference between trees that were fertilized at the time of planting versus those that were not. It can be quite substantial, and this benefit's going to go on through rotation. So anyways, that just basically presents the need. I'm just curious, anybody got any questions after that? Good? Okay, proceed on. Let's talk about the tea bag. So as I was mentioning before, the objective of the tea bag fertilization, and let's put it, the one thing that I want to describe at the very beginning, our tea bags are generally, they come in 10, 20, and 30 gram sizes, but generally for most forestry applications, mining reclamation applications, 10 grams is more than adequate. Tea bag paper is just the same paper that they would use for regular tea bags for tea. It's the paper in itself doesn't do anything. It's just a package to be able to contain 10 grams of fertilizer, so it's consistent every time and makes it easy for the planters to handle. So, but the objective of the tea bag is to supply that seedling with an easy source of balanced nutrition to aid in its establishment. So in order to capture the site faster, as I've been describing, it's really the bridge from the nursery to the site. So there's three vital components to our tea bag. First of all, there's the nutrition that it contains. The second thing is the control of the release. And the third thing that the tea bag allows us to do is to get that nutrition in the soil right beside the plug so that the seedling has easy access to the nutrients. I throw this in there just for fun, but lots of people think that fertilizer they talked about is tree food. Bottom line is fertilizer is not tree food. That comes from your photosynthate that the tree creates itself when it's photosynthesizing. The sugars it produces, what it really does is just provide the building blocks to be able to create chlorophyll and foliage and roots and all those kind of things for the tree to grow. Balanced nutrition, this is important. This is one of the key components of the tea bag. So what's really important to understand is that trees need more than just NPK. Plants can actually need up to 16 different elements, maybe even more. The tea bags provide the balanced source of nutrition, including sulfur. So this one, in a sulfate form, this is one of the most limiting nutrients that you find anywhere in British Columbia. I'm sure it's probably no different in Alberta or Saskatchewan because it leaches. So what's really important, the tea bag also provides these nutrients in a format the seedlings can immediately utilize. So it's not hard for them to get it, doesn't take very long, and they can start benefiting from it. At the bottom there, I was just wanting to mention something about sulfur, talking about nutrients actually having to go through a conversion process. Something that's really important to note is that the nutrients that we use are immediately available to the seedling. Something like raw elemental sulfur is going to have to go through a conversion process. Yes, it's cheap, but it would have to go through a conversion process by soil biology first before it's converted to sulfate, which is what the seedling actually uses. So we have sulfate in our products, not sulfur. The colder your soils, the longer that process of converting sulfur to sulfate is going to take, because the soil biology is going to be, its rate of conversion is going to be determined by soil temperatures. So having things in a sulfate form in our tea bags is really important so that the seedling can get the nutrients right away. The second thing that's really important, and this is the power of the product. Yes, you can get fertilizers in all different kinds of forms, but the power of our product is the rate of release. Our product releases products at a rate and amount that trees can utilize so that it's not leaching away. The tea bag is releasing the nutrients at temperatures when roots are growing, once again, so that the product's not wasted by leaching away in the soil. And this is going to last for most likely 1, but if you have really cold soils, maybe up to 2 growing seasons. Now, here's the myth. A lot of people came to me when I first started this and they're like, why couldn't I just go buy bulk fertilizer in a bag and just go get a film canister or a little cup and just pour a little bit of that fertilizer around the base of the tree? The bottom line is the release rate is just as important as the nutrition. So if the components of your fertilizer are releasing too quickly because they have no coatings controlling the release, you could end up losing most of what you're adding to the site just because it's simply leaching away or volatilizing into the air before the seedling can even get to it. It may not also be balanced for tree seedlings. It may be balanced for something else. So the release rate is absolutely critical because seedlings do not grow fast. They like to eat things cafeteria style, as they say, slowly throughout the growing season. They don't want a big shot all at once. So here's some our PHP tea bags. There's a happy woodlot owner. That seedling that he's measuring right there was only planted 2 months earlier, and you can already see the growth that we've gotten off of that tree. The PHP for our tea bags, just to let you know, means planting hole placement. In other words, we can put them in the same hole as a seedling. So the old way of doing things was in the old days, people had to put tea bags in a separate hole because the control of the release of the fertilizer nutrients was too quickly. As a result, salts could build up around the roots, and when you get too much salt building up around the root system of the seedling, you could end up creating root mortality, which could not only set the tree back, but it could even kill it. So the only problem with putting the seedling in a separate hole and far away, if the planters put it too deep or they put it too far away, the tea bag doesn't release effectively, so the seedling's not getting the nutrients. And this happened quite a bit because planters were afraid of killing trees and burning the roots. So instead of putting the tea bag in the right spot, they tended to put it too far away, which made for some inconsistent results in the field. Now, as you can see by that seedling down there, you can see some little gold krills in the soil beside the root system where the plug used to be, and that's a 1-year-old seedling. how close we can get those nutrients with the new coatings that we have, or the PHP coatings that we have now. Like I was saying, we can put these tea bags in the same hole as a seedling. So that makes it just a lot more effective. This is a 1-year-old seedling that was planted near Golden, BC. You can see the color of the seedling, the benefits that it's getting. You can see the crown that it's starting to build. It's made all the difference in the world as far as consistent in the efficacy of the product delivering nutrients to seedlings over time. I show this picture because once again, it shows how close that we can get the seedling or the tea bag to the seedling plug. It's really hard to show it. I don't know if you can see my arrow there, but that's the tea bag. This would be the plug over here. So basically they were side by each. Now roots don't grow into the tea bag, so there's going to be one side where the roots don't grow, but the rest of the seedling grows roots just like crazy. As you can see, I've been to this site a number of years later, and the trees are absolutely amazing in keeping up with their competition. So it's really good. We could never do this in the past. How do the coatings in the tea bag fertilizer work? So if you were to rip open a tea bag, you'll see a whole bunch of balls. Like you can see right here, this would be an example of one of them. We call them fertilizer prills. So when the coating goes into the soil, when soil temperatures get to the point where roots can start to grow, the coating starts to swell. And in that coating are pores. And so those pores, as they open up, they let moisture in, the nutrients go into solution, then they diffuse back out into the soil and are taken up by the tree through reverse osmosis. The faster, or the warmer the soil, the more that coating expands, but it's never going to get to the point where it's going to cause a catastrophic release. It's all going to be at a rate that seedlings can handle. So this gives you an example of how the release happens over a growing season. You can see at the beginning that soil's at the very left-hand side there. Use my arrow again. You can see the line's quite flat. That's because soils are cold. That's also when the seedling's going into the ground. It takes a little bit to get its feet underneath it. But when soils are cold, the fertilizer's not releasing very fast, but the roots aren't growing either. But this really mimics soil biology, releasing nutrients to a seedling over time, in the sense that as the soil's warm, you can see that the rate of release picks up. It's consistent throughout the summer as the seeds are growing, and then as the fertilizer starts to run out in the fall, where the soil temperatures start to cool off, then it starts to flatten again. If you end up in a situation where you have a very short growing season, that flattening in the fall could happen much sooner, and any leftover fertilizer will be available for the next spring. It's not going anywhere. Something that's important to note is that product quality, as far as release control is concerned, we know that it's rock solid. We've never had a catastrophic plantation failure as a result of this product, and it's been going since 2013 with tens of millions of seedlings so far. But every batch before it's sent out is tested for a week, fully submerged in water at 100 degrees Fahrenheit, much higher soil temperatures than anything that most trees are ever going to see, to make sure that the release is consistent. This makes it very environmentally friendly to use. One of the things that's really key, of course, is planters are always concerned about what they're handling. With the release characteristics of this product, there's almost no ability whatsoever for a planter to come into contact with the nutrients inside. Being able to put it in the same hole also makes for reduced repetitive stress injuries, because they only have to go with one hole rather than making two like they did in the past. And of course, we send out safety and handling guidelines with every order for the planting community who's using them. Planter safety. Once again, these things are all of our tea bag material is sourced and analyzed for heavy metals. Everything's well within safe limits. These things have been studied by Ferric and WorkSafe BC, Western Silviculture Contractors Association. It has been deemed a very safe product to use. So using common sense precautions such as wearing gloves and proper hygiene. Once again, it's almost impossible for the planter to come into contact with any of the nutrients inside of the prills. We've even done our own test. We took a tea bags of us and another source of tea bag fertilizer, and we put them fully submerged in water, left them there for 2 hours, and then measured every half an hour of how much nutrient content was left in each tea bag. Ours are in the green. You can see that even after 2 hours, and that would be the length of a long bag up, that 98% of the nutrient is still sitting inside of those prills. It's not releasing, even in full rain. It's not releasing into the planter's hands. You can see if you don't have as good a control on your release, that you can lose a lot of it, even before that tea bag even makes it into the ground. So that's why we have the coatings that we do. The tea bag's getting the fertilizer. It's not going into the planter's hand. It's going into the seedling. As far as environmental safety is concerned, once again, they've been all tested for heavy metals. I can send you this chart too if you wanted it, but the bottom line is the levels of heavy metals in the material are so absolutely ridiculously negligible. You would never have a negative environmental impact on a site by using our product. End of story. So the other thing that's really important is that even if you had our product and it spilled into a creek, the coatings are controlled by temperature, not by water. So it's still going to be releasing extremely slowly. The creek's really cold. The nutrients are going to stay tight within the tea bag, which makes these things really great to use in and around aquatic ecosystems. Any questions on the tea bag at all? How it functions or works?
I got
Okay.
a quick question. Are they all the same size? Have you guys tried different sizes, and is there any benefits to making them smaller, bigger? And can you get them to last longer than like that 2-year sort of time frame?
So the first question is like, can you, with different sizes? The bottom line is a seedling can only take up so much nutrient in 1 year. People have tried with larger sizes than that, but 10 grams is about the right amount. Other than that, you're just going to overwhelm them, and then you could end up feeding the brush competition instead. What was your second question? Oh yeah, making them last longer. You really want to be able to push those nutrients during the first growing season, because that's the pivotal growing season. Everything that happens after that will be from the tree growing and drying stuff from the site. So the 1 year, that's the critical pivotal growing season. So that's why the length of time.
Okay,
We wanted
awesome.
to release, like we could get stuff to release slower by thickening coatings, but then it would release too slowly.
Right.
The seedling wouldn't be getting enough during that first year.
Second question I have here is, what's the best place to get more information? Do you guys have a website or something? And if so, what is it? Or could you type it in the chat?
Yeah, at the end of this presentation, I'll have a link to the website. But you can look up for all our products and everything. It's www.reforest.com. I also have a YouTube channel. Everything that I just described right there, as far as the tea bag and how it works and placement, where to placement, I've got YouTube videos on that and on the long-term benefits of the product. So the YouTube channel is Integral Forest Management Ltd, and you'll be able to find it. But all of these things are listed at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question in the chat here, Darius, and it's how do the tea bags do in heavily compacted sites?
Okay, well, this is where it comes down to, I always stress with people that tea bag fertilizer is part of your silviculture regime. It's not the regime. So if you have heavily compacted sites, your limiting factor becomes soil density and soil compaction, which limits your roots' ability to get out. So the tea bag's not going to fix that, even though you may have the nutrients available. You still need to loosen up those soils so that your roots can get out, and not only that, so that moisture can penetrate and get into them. If you leave your soils dense, you're still going to get an effect but it won't be as great as if those soils were loosened. The better the microsite, the better the response.
Okay, thank you for that. We have another question in the chat. So for clarity, can the PHP tea bag be placed right next to the plug?
Yes. According to our specs. And we have those specs online. And they're handed out when we ship everything. So, but when I say that, putting them, it definitely needs to be according to spec, because you don't want that tea bag bunched up against the seedling, or you can still create damage. It can be in the same hole, but not right up against the plug.
Okay.
Okay.
How far away can it be from the plug?
You don't want it more than an inch or two. But I mean, if it's touching very slightly at the edge, it's fine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that's all we have for questions. If anyone else has any questions as we go, you can feel free to type them in the chat, and at the next question period, then I'll read them off to Darius.
Yeah, so now the next part of my presentation is just some of the areas where people have used the product. So
We got one more question.
okay, sure.
Any difference in fall or winter planting versus spring/summer plant?
Nope. People use it with fall plants, and they also use it with spring plants. So a huge amount of the efficacy and how much the tea bag that the seedling is able to get is also going to depend on site conditions. If you end up with a really super dry fall, then that fertilizer is not moving. So I know people in the interior BC will do fall plants, but if things start to dry out, they'll back off, hold their trees over until the spring when there's more soil moisture. So.
Wait, that's all we got for questions.
Perfect. So yeah, one of the main reason that a lot of people that I know use this is because of brush competition, in hopes of getting their seedlings above the brush before the brush takes over and they have to spend thousands of dollars weeding their trees out. So the bottom line is, if the seedling's not going to be able to capture the site, there's certainly other plants that are going to be able to. So you got to get that seedling off right away in these brushy type sites. I know in northern Alberta, you're probably dealing with this a lot. Seedlings that end up under the brush end up looking like this. The chance of that seedling ever making a crop tree are probably zero, even though you can count it as a surviving seedling in your survey now. This is what we deal with a lot in the interior of BC, and in northern BC, you can get some severely brushed in sites. This is what a site looks like 4 years after it was harvested. I mean, that brush is like up to your waist or higher. You can only imagine what it's like for a seedling to try and struggle through it. Yet on this site, they did fertilize at the time of planting, and there are trees and they are breaking through. You can see that they're going toe to toe with the brush, and they're getting through it just fine by giving them the resources right at the very beginning. So if you can get that tree in planting it right after harvesting before the brush takes over, and let that tree have a growing season in the daylight for a year with the tea bag fertilizer, you have a very good opportunity of staying ahead of the brush without having to do further interventions. So when my example as a silviculture forester, we went from hectares and hectares of brushing to doing no brushing once we started using this product. Here's a couple of examples of just the trees. That brush has come in pretty thick, but you can see that with the vigor they've got from the fertilizer, they're still able to pop through it. So fertilizing at the time of planting, we also have brush that's woody vegetation, such as aspen and willow and alder and birch and those kinds of things that don't come in initially at the very beginning, but will come in like 7 to 10 years down the road. So we always want to get foresters to be anticipating what's coming. You take a look at those two seedlings. Which Douglas fir do you think is going to do better when that brush finally shows up? Here's an example of control and treatment 2 years after planting. One fertilized on the right, the other is the control. So when you think about brush coming in and which one's going to be able to compete with it with it a few years down the road, just imagine. So here we are at year 11. The one on the left, That would be your control tree. You can see that the birch is there and it's taller than the tree. I mean, the tree's there, but it's having to compete. I mean, look at how thin that crown is versus the one on the right. I mean, you can't even see it in the picture. You can't even see the top of the tree. It's well above the birch, even though it's there. So on the left, you're probably going to end up doing a little bit of brushing on that site. You're going to have to spend the money doing it. On the right, where we've tea bag fertilized, you're not going to have to be doing any brushing whatsoever. Those trees are through it and they're looking great. Yeah, I just wanted to show you guys a bit of a YouTube video here for a couple of minutes, and this gives an example of that same site. Hopefully this works. Yeah, so that gives you a bit of an indication of what the differences that can be made. What I always find amazing, oops, let's see if I can get past this. There we go. Sorry. So is the fact that what you saw there was 9-year-old trees, and all that happened, the difference between treatment and control happened at the beginning with only 10 grams of fertilizer. You can see the benefit that happens over time. But you just look at the cost of brushing, and I'm talking here in BC, like we can tea bag fertilize for $300 to $400 a hectare, or we can manually brush once for $1,000, $2,000, even more per hectare nowadays. If you end up having to fill plant because you have a failure because your trees got lost under the brush, that's costing $1 or more a tree. So you can see that it's extremely cost effective in as far as keeping your trees ahead of the brush and keeping them going. Now let's talk about volume production and carbon capture, because that's the next benefit that comes along with keeping your trees ahead of the brush. So I just show you this chart here quickly. Each one of these bars at by the end of year 12, this is from that same site that you just saw the video of. You can see this is the volume difference cubic centimeters between treatment tree, which was fertilized at the time of planting, versus the control. And you can see that even though the fertilizer was, like I said, again, used up after the first growing season, the benefit of that tree more effectively capturing the site continues to widen over time. What's really interesting too, and I just want to point out, is between year 11 and 12, you can see that things really jumped. Well, year 11 happened to be the year of the heat dome. I don't know if you guys got it in Alberta as severe as what we did in BC, but we had temperatures that were 40+ degrees. That really impacted trees. There was a lot of needles on even mature trees that plain just got fried onto the tree. There was a ton of needle drop afterwards. But what was really interesting is the trees that were fertilized at the time of planting were more vigorous and had bigger crowns, and they got through it a lot better. and you can see that they're bounced back. It was like they never even missed a beat. And you can see the volume jump that happened the following year when they got some rain. We've also charted things in growth and yield over time through the rotation, which is be about year 50. We figure that you can either shorten your rotation by about 9 years on this particular site, or you can have 40% more volume at age 50. Take it whichever way you want it. The bottom line is you're going to get more volume over time by fertilizing at the time of planting. So in terms of carbon capture, which people like to think about, I mean, in this particular site, when we did the calculation, the control trees are going to capture about 78 tons of carbon at the end of a 50-year rotation versus 106 for the ones that were fertilized at the time of planting. So if that's something that's on your mind, that's another way of looking at it. Fertilized trees are definitely going to capture more carbon because they have bigger crowns. Any questions on this?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask them as well if you'd like.
One thing I would add is that I've got a number of long-term trials. I mean, like I said, I've got YouTube videos on them, but I've also got the trial write-ups if anybody ever wants them because they want to take a look and see more data and all the rest of it. I'm more than happy to provide it.
We got one question here in the chat, Darius.
Sure.
Was there any noticeable increase in disease or insect infestation resistance?
It's anecdotal, but yes, and I'm getting to that part.
Okay.
Well, in this particular site, we have what they call armillaria root rot. It's just always present in the soil and infects trees and kills the cambium layer near the base of the tree and kills the trees. It's a real problem in the interior wet belt. I can definitely say that there was a lot more root rot infested trees in the control area than in the treatment area. It was not recorded, but just walking through the site, you can definitely notice a difference. So the bottom line is better nutrition is going to make your trees more resilient to pests and disease. So we're talking about defense. A more vigorous tree with the right nutrients can more effectively defend itself. So a lot of cases, people are wanting to do this for deer browse. They especially like our product with higher sulfur levels in it to help deter browsing. This particular seedling here was devoured or chewed on by voles, but you can see it bounced back pretty quickly as a result of being fertilized. We've also done terpene analysis as far as these are the chemicals, I guess you could say, that the seedling produces to defend itself. Comparing a control versus our treated product, which is the tea bag name is Continuum PHP. You can see there's a lot higher levels of terpenes or defense mechanisms, chemicals, whatever you want to nutrient, whatever you want to call them, in the treated product versus the one that was a control. So that makes them a lot less palatable. But even if it does happen, the one thing is the tree grows a much thicker stem quicker. It's a lot harder for a vole or a deer or moose or whatever to girdle a tree, take its entire crown off when you got a thicker stem than a thin stem. So it can also help deter browsing or get the tree through these problems that way as well. This particular site, the first time it was planted, the trees were completely decimated because they weren't fertilized at the time of planting, went back and fertilized at the time of planting. Yeah, they got some nibbling, but they certainly weren't taken out. And then once again, even if they do get nibbled, you can see it just gives them a lot more vigor to bounce back. The other products that we have a product called a hydration pack. It has 2 grams of moisture retaining polymer as well as 8 grams of fertilizer. So it can help trees when you end up with moisture deficits fairly quickly after planting. You can see that roots of the seedling are actually growing right into the polymer. The fertilizer is mixed in, but they can go in, they can just draw water out. You can see the little my fingers pointing at a little mass of roots that was formed around that tea bag to help keep it going in these really dry sites. So that's a product we have if you have moisture deficits. These trees were taken on the Chilcotin Plateau, which is just west of Williams Lake, and that's in the rain shadow of the coastal mountains, and that place is dry and has really desiccating winds. But you can just see by the needle length how much better a tree fertilized at the time of planting looks in that type of a situation. Of course, these things are also used for reclamation. This is typically what we end up with soil on a mine site. You can see the little plants in the foreground there. Those were all fertilized at the time of planting. Sometimes that soil is so dense, I show a little bit of scratching there that I was using with my army knife, but there's no way I could penetrate the soil. It just was concrete. So I guess asking that question about dense soils, yes, it can still work on them. This is what on those dense soils on a mine site, what trees used to look like. Here's a control tree. Not much there. Fertilized at the time of planting into that concrete. If you get the trees in early enough and you fertilize at the time of planting, these were actually planted with hydration packs that I was showing you before, the ones with the polymer in them. And you can see how much better that spruce tree looks. Foliage biomass, color, stem diameter. And you get to a site 18 years later, and you can see the crowns develop and eventually the trees start to take over. So things are looking good that way. We've also used them on the oil sands. They're used up there. They tend to use a lot of grass along with their trees, which be better if they didn't use the grass and just let the trees grow on their own. But you can see what a difference a treated and a control tree can look like. This is what reclamation used to be in the olden days. People used to just make things nice and smooth, and they planted grass and fertilized it with agronomics. And this is what it looks like now. People are using a lot more native vegetation. They are collecting seed from the site before they even harvest or do the mining. They grow those seedlings, nurseries, and then plant them out again. These seedlings were all, this is a rose, prickly rose, and it was all fertilized at the time of planting with our product. Here's another site, the willow bush or willow that was also fertilized at the time of planting with our product to reestablish it. What sites can look like 5 years after, even in those really dense soils when they're loosened up and fertilized at the time of planting. This is what it can look like. So take-home messages. Greatest physiological benefit of fertilizing at the time of planting with our tea bags is an increase of volumes of the roots and foliage in the stem, which helps the seedling overcome site limiting factors such as your pests and your brush competition. It basically allows it to capture the site much quicker. Fertilizing at the time of planting with RTI's tea bags also has a potential to accelerate your growth curve, capture more carbon. What you do at the time of planting is going to determine the growth trajectory of your tree. So using our product at the very beginning makes a huge difference. Just want to go back a few slides here before we go into your talk there, Brandon.
Yeah, and we have one more question in the chat as well.
Sure. I was wanting to show you one more slide. I should have put it at the... I also just wanted to let you know this reclamation, this is the Comess mine that's up in northern BC. We did a massive reclamation project with them when they closed the mine. All that grass and everything in the front there was all fertilized with a bulk product that we have. I just wanted to let you know about it. It's called delayed release. They just spread it with helicopters when they were applying their grasses. So that's another way of doing it. If you have large reclamation projects on mine sites, you need to cover a lot of ground. We don't just have our product as tea bag fertilizer, but it can also come in bulk. So this is what it can look like. Same controlled release. So I'll forward ahead here, Brandon. I don't know if you want me to advance the slides or not.
Yeah, maybe just because you're the one sharing that you could.
Sure.
But the one question we have here is, how effective are they in thick grass?
You want to get there before the grass does. What you want to do is be as tight to harvesting as you possibly can. Grass will also grab a hold of the product. So if you have a well-established grass community already on site and then you plant your trees, your chances of getting through that grass are not as great as if you've got a nice bare template and then you fertilize at the time of planting and get your trees ahead of the grass before it really catches on the site. I know with one consultant that I work with on mining reclamation, they would plant all their native vegetation first and all their native grasses 2 years later. Grass and trees don't mix. Grass is just a terrible competitor. So I hope that answers that question. But the bottom line is you want to give that tree the opportunity to grab a hold of that fertilizer when it's unhindered by anything else to really get ahead of that competing vegetation.
Awesome, thanks for that. So we have a few Fortech staff on this webinar, and one of them being Nicole. So Nicole, if you want to unmute yourself and just introduce yourself and then talk a bit about our services.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Nicole. I am in business development with Fortech. It's nice to see some familiar names on here today. Yeah, anyways, here this slide shows you kind of a comprehensive list of services we have to offer, which of course include tree planting and fertilizer installation as well. So if you guys have any questions or you need any more information about forestry or environmental services that Fortech does, you can definitely reach out to me. I'll type my email in the chat here again and my phone number. And you can, of course, also go to our website, www.fortech.ca.
Awesome, thanks, Nicole. Darius, we'll go next slide. So I'd like to introduce everyone else to another Fortech staff member that we have in the webinar today, Layla. Layla, if you want to unmute yourself and just introduce yourself a bit and talk about your role at Fortech and what we're hiring for.
Sure. So hey everyone, I'm Layla. I'm a little bit newer to Fortech. I am part of HR recruiting as well as sales. As you see on the slide here, we are hiring for forestry technicians in Alberta and BC, waste and residue surveyors out in BC, and some stubborn students. We still have a few spots open for that. I would highly recommend always checking out our website. We are constantly looking for people and to grow our company. We're also getting our foot in the door with some type 3 firefighting stuff, which leads into any sort of emergency response for floods, mudslides, avalanches, which is a great opportunity. So if that's something you're also interested in and like some more information, you can send me an email or send your resume out to careers and I can help lead you in the right direction and set up an interview.
Awesome, thanks, Layla. Next slide, Darius.
So there we go. There's all of my contact information. If you wanted more information on the product at all.
And then that, yeah, it looks like you got your YouTube account there.
Yeah, I should
Phone
have
number,
everything.
email,
Yeah, I see
website.
everything there. So
Yeah, awesome.
So is this going to be placed somewhere so that somebody can refer to it later on? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we'll post this on YouTube for sure, and maybe some other platforms.
Okay.
So yeah, we can let you know. Actually, Riley, if you want to maybe type in the chat just a link to our Fortech YouTube account, that's where it will be posted to. We also have a bunch of other webinars, podcasts, all sorts of videos we've done over the years on different types of topics. We try to do one of these every month is our target. Some months we miss them, but in general, we're getting one a month. So anyone on here, if you do have interest in, presenting your product or your services or setting up some sort of collaboration with Fortech to get your information out, or if you just want to be a guest speaker, feel free to reach out to myself. Is probably the best. You could reach out to Nicole as well, but I'll type my email in the chat. Want to go next slide, Darius, when you have time? I think it might actually be my contact info. Yeah, so there it is. So yeah, my contact info is there. Nicole's contact info there. And then if you would like to schedule like a 30-minute or 15-minute time slot with Nicole to discuss any of your projects that you need done, anything that falls within that list of services that we had there, then feel free to just pull up your phone and shoot that QR code, and it should allow you to book time on her calendar. And we also have Fortech social media accounts there as well. It's just at fortech.ca on all social medias. And next slide.
That might be it.
Okay.
I'm not
So
forwarding any further, so.
yeah, perfect. We're right on time, 2:01. So
Nailed
in
it.
Mountain Daylight Time. So perfect. Great job today, Darius. We really appreciated having you on. Great product that you guys have there. Learned a lot, you know, about how it could be useful for some of our projects in the future. So we'll definitely keep that in mind and look forward to working with you at some point in the future. And if anyone has any final questions, feel free to just type them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them now. If not, then we'll finish off the presentation.
Brandon, before everybody hops off here, I'd love to pick a winner for that $50
Oh,
gift
yeah.
certificate for our online store.
Completely forgot the draw. Yeah. Yeah. So anyone that messaged their email and me they work with and put into the chat got entered to win a $50 certificate to our store. So here we go.
All right.
Shannon Kozlowski, you're the winner. Congratulations. We have your email now, so correct me if I'm wrong, Riley, but she'll just receive a email with the coupon, the $50 certificate, and then you'll send a link to the store, and then she can go in and just order what she'd like.
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon. I'll shoot that information over here right away.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat. A lot of people saying thank you for your time, Darius, today. So I know I learned a lot. It was great to have you on, and we'll close off the webinar.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you inviting me on here. It's been great to share with our product with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, keep in touch.